midweek of Holy Week, I always like to stop and talk about Judas, who had such a vital role in the whole story of Holy Week. And often he's just dismissed as a one-dimensional bad guy. Everybody dumps on Judas, the betrayer. We don't want to have anything to do with Judas, which actually kind of reminds me of not having anything to do with Bruno. The problem with that is that we fail to see a very significant member of the early Christian community. Now, there's a Gospel of Judas out there. It was believed to be written at the earliest at about mid second century. It's not historical, it's not particularly theological. It's part of the Gnostic framework of Gospels. Almost every apostle had their own Gospel assigned to them. There is actual standards as to why some were in the Bible and some are not. It's not just a free for all. There was lines, and one of the things with the Gospel of Judas is it doesn't tell us anything new. It's basically a gospel that says that Jesus planned all of this, that Judas was just playing a role that Jesus had assigned to him, which doesn't work, quite frankly, with how the church sees Jesus. It gets Judas off the hook in a certain regard, but it fails, I think, to recognize the depth of the agony that Judas was going through. And we owe him the opportunity to be there. Judas denied himself the chance for reformation. He didn't have an opportunity to kind of say, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. He never had what Peter had when Peter kept mucking up and he denied Jesus. He got to have a future. Judas denied himself that opportunity. Here's a man, for all we know, someone who's maybe not the purest person in the world, but certainly not the one who's made the worst choices, who believed and followed Jesus right from the beginning, who got to Jerusalem and started to get scared, started to wonder what was going on. He probably had no concept. In fact, I am absolutely positive he had no idea the depth of the destruction the temple authorities wanted to impose on Jesus. They didn't have the political power or legal power to do it, but they wanted to. And here Judas helplessly walks into a situation thinking probably that they're just going to put him in a room somewhere, put him away, maybe send him out of town, get him out of the way, but they'd all live to have another day, another week, another crack at this. That's not what happened. And when Judas discovered that what he thought, what he assumed was going to be simply removing Jesus, actually turned into this political theater that ultimately led to his execution, Judas was absolutely destroyed. He went back to the temple authorities, and their attitude is, sucks to suck. They didn't care. And Judas, not the betrayer, but the one betrayed, decided he could not face Jesus, he couldn't face the world, he couldn't face the other disciples, and he'd ended his life. He never allowed himself to have a conversation with Jesus. He never allowed himself to take time to reflect on why he was feeling so scared and so protective and like he could make a difference, that his friend and mentor would be able to live past this week, even though all the predictions from Jesus were that he was going to die. It is inconceivable when you are with someone and they talk about their death that you can really understand what that means. Humans aren't made like that. It just doesn't work like that. Judas probably had no concept. And even if he was entertaining slightly what Jesus was saying, because the odds were against Jesus being hurt, he might be thinking a mob beating him down or someone deciding to stone him. He had no idea crucifixion by the Romans was what was going to happen, that he set in motion something that was going to be so destructive. And he did not last long enough to see Easter Sunday. He removed himself from that. He's kind of a sad figure, really. He's someone who wanted to protect Jesus and in the end made some horrible choices that led to Jesus being exposed. Now, the Gospel of Judas, saying this is all Jesus' plan, doesn't allow Judas any action, any authority, any personal connection. It treats Jesus like a pawn. It might, or sorry, Judas like a pawn. It might explain away and give him deniability in all of this, but it does not treat him the way Jesus had always treated him, as someone who is capable of making choices, as someone who looked around, decided what might be the better way to go, and went set about doing that. Jesus gave him that opportunity, knew probably, possibly what was coming, maybe the extent of it, maybe not. Made Judas feel extremely guilty. And, if you've ever done something, your guilt is compounded, whether the person challenging you actually knows it or not. But he was just a simple man doing what he thought was probably going to end very differently. And in the end, for him, couldn't accept the destruction that he saw his friend about to experience. If anything, Judas should not be written up as one cartoon character of betrayal and evil and bad. He should be seen as a rather pathetic individual, multifaceted, who had such a sad ending that he could have been there on Easter Sunday, like all the rest, to see that it was okay. But he never gave himself the chance.